I was too excited.
All right, now we're back. I think we're at episode 16 of AWS She Builds Tech Skills. My name is Maya, Solutions Architect from AWS, and here with our lovely co-host, we'll be talking about security and all other things. May.
Hello. Hi, Mai, and hello to everyone on the chat. My name is May. I'm a solutions architect from AWS based out of Sydney.
Awesome. So, what have we got on offer today? Before we get into what May's going to be presenting to us today, let's talk about what's been released today. What's new today, May? What have you heard?
Well,
News.
okay, so it's a big announcement, and I'm sure everyone have been hearing online. And we have a new region announcement in Australia, and the new region for Melbourne. So the first Australia region was launched in 2012, which is Sydney region, as you're already familiar with. But now we have a Melbourne region, and it's announced today. So how exciting is that?
Super exciting, May. Like I've been to Melbourne more than a few times. It's a lovely city, isn't it? You've been to
It
Melbourne a few
is.
times too, right?
Do you know what? I used to live in Melbourne for about 4 or 5 years, fresh out of uni. I worked there for a couple of years. I studied there, so I really had a great time there. That was that was a decades ago.
Ah, cool.
But
Yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome. Yeah, so you must have had really awesome coffee. I mean, Melbourne's the coffee capital of the
yeah,
dare I say world in Australia, anyhow.
it is quite popular, isn't it? So if you're from Australia, and we really like our coffee, and we're very particular of how we like our coffee. What sort of coffee do you drink, Mai?
Actually, I'm not a coffee drinker, and this will
Oh,
disappoint a lot of Melburnians, especially. But yeah, I can't handle too much caffeine. But people argue that there's
well,
lots of caffeine in tea as well. But somehow, with coffee, kind of sends me over the edge. So I stick with my green tea.
no, that's good. That's good. But we'll see about that. But the Melbourne has a really good coffee. It's always a bit of a competition between Melbourne and Sydney, which coffee's better, which brunch place or cafes are better. But I can see in the chat there are a lot of people joining. So Ruben, hello from Mexican. Hello, welcome to the show. Joe's Meller, apologies if I'm pronouncing your handles. Hello from Peru. Welcome to the show. If you haven't seen She Builds Tech Skills, we are all about women in technology, sharing technical tips and tricks today, announcement, and also security is the topic of the month.
Yeah, so
Cool.
just checking in with the audience. There's more people here as well. Is everyone a coffee drinker, or are they more of a tea drinker, or neither? Put it in the
Oh,
chat. So we'd love to know.
that's a hard question. I drink both. So you don't drink coffee at all, Mar, or do you
I
have it
don't drink coffee at
occasionally?
all. No, I don't drink coffee at all.
That's an interesting fact. Okay. And green tea is your go-to.
Yeah, green tea, herbal tea, any kind of tea, bubble tea,
Bubble tea.
bubble
Yeah.
tea, yeah.
I love bubble tea.
Or I think in some
Chai.
parts of the world,
I
chai,
love
yeah.
chai. I think sometimes I have chai just before bed. It just like really calm me down, the sweetness and then the smell.
Yeah,
Cool. I
yeah.
I have coffee every morning, like maybe two, three, sometimes four. Who's counting? So
Oh wow, well that'll help you with talking about the Melbourne region, right? So are you
yeah.
excited to talk about the Melbourne region with your customers, mate?
I have some conversation this morning. So as soon as we see the launch, I was so excited, and you'll probably see at the announcement on the blog post, the announcement from like a few different places. So I was so excited, but they're slowly rolling out some of these services. So I'll have to keep an eye on it, what sort of services are coming up in Melbourne region. There's also an interesting question from the audience. And Ojita, thanks for asking the question. Any price difference? What do you think, Mai?
I haven't, to be honest, I haven't looked into the pricing as such. If anything, it'll be on the. Uh,
Yeah, but we can share the tips how you can check the price, right? So if you, I'm just gonna share my screen. Let's see if I can successfully share my screen. So I pasted in the link in the chat. So this is the region announcement post, and if you, by the way, it's called AP Southeast 4. And you can see it on the console as well. And if you go all the way down, you will see all the amazing story and history of, some of the AWS investment in Australia and New Zealand. If you're interested, have a look through that, why we are investing in the Asia Pacific regions and some of the AWS customers that has a massive, impact with the Melbourne region launch. RMIT is my university. I went to RMIT for 4 years. And then there's an interesting fact around here. So some of the user group, if you're interested in the user group and community, there is a link here. It's a regional service links. And if you go to regional service list, you will see all the services available for Melbourne region. And if you go into the service that you want to know the pricing, you can go and check it out, and then the pricing for that region will appear. So that's a little trick for you to find out if there's any pricing difference on that. So there you have it. Cool.
all right. Now, okay. So with Melbourne launch, I know our CTO Werner Vogels is coming to visit our shores, mate. So what's happening there?
That's right. So Werner Vogels, who is the CTO of Amazon.com, and he is also a VP. So he's going to visit Australia, and we have a few events. If you're based out of Sydney, I think there's a one community events happening in Sydney, and it's going to be in person in Sydney. So let me find that link, and if I can find that, let me put it in the chat. So if you want to meet up, and there is a link in the chat. If you want to meet up, have a community conversation with the AWS community member, and also more importantly with the Dr. Warner Vogels to hear about what are the things that we're doing in the community space. A bit more about AI ML in the AWS community. Have a listen to it. And then it's going to be in person. So it's one of those events happening in person in Sydney.
Yeah, Sydney I think there's one in Melbourne, is there? As well?
I think, let me find that link if there's one in Melbourne.
Yeah, while you're doing that, let's talk about what he posted. Like, I think it was before Christmas or around Christmas, his top 20 albums of the decade or couple of
Oh,
decades.
what is that? Before we jump in, I just want to address. So, is there any sound, or is it just me from Raw Stripe? If you can hear both of us, can you please put it in the chat, yes or no, so that if we're having an audio issue, we can fix it. If you can hear us, just put a yes in the chat, so it will help us. Or if we need a new mic.
Obviously, we can hear ourselves, but could be wrong.
It could be wrong.
Could be wrong. Oh,
Oh,
awesome.
amazing. Thank
Yes,
you.
it's coming through.
All right.
Make sure that your Twitch screen or your browser isn't muted, because by default, I believe it is muted. So you need to adjust on the Twitch browser screen as well as your normal speaker. So
Cool. Awesome. All right. So what is the top 10 albums, Mai?
yes. So have you got that open? Let's just see. So let me just post that into the chat so that everyone knows what it is.
Ah, is it?
Yeah, so an album for each year, 2022 version is what I'm referring to. So I'm looking at this, and there are things. There are certain albums that I like. 1986, Run DMC, Raising Hell. That was a real. That's probably too old for some people here, but if you're into old school stuff, that was a classic. I would say that was when hip hop was created. Around about that time, it probably was created way back, but yeah, my mum was listening to that quite a lot. And
Oh
yeah, not
wow.
yeah, Nirvana. I think that was iconic. Everyone was, was listening to that. Rage Against the Machine. Um,
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Red Hot Chili Peppers for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, is that your favorite, mate?
it's really popular. It's one of my favorite, I have to say. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. They were playing a lot of that. DMX, RIP. Uh, Definitely did hear that at the clubs. Eminem, yeah, Eminem he was everywhere. He still is everywhere still, right? And I'm curious about our audience here. What's your favorite album? Either from, recent years or from way back when? Do you agree with this list? Is there something that's missing? What are your thoughts? I'm sure, some of you listen to some kind of music. Maybe you listen to music when you're coding or doing work, working from home. Love to know what your favorite albums or artists are.
Yeah. What's like, I usually listen to sometime with no, um, like just the static noise, depending on the mood. Depending on the mood. Sometimes really upbeat music, just like get me into the zone, and then like you don't hear anything. You just blocked out all the noise, got your headphones on, and just like do your things. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. If people have trouble sleeping, I think that's a really good way to get to sleep. All right, there's someone here. Reggae.
Nice. That
Wow,
is that's
that's
pretty
awesome.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I can only think of Bob Marley, which is a very
He's
limited
really, yeah.
knowledge. Aphex Twin needs to be on the list. Yeah, agreed. Yeah, The Weekend was on there, which is cool. Different genre. Yeah,
Hmm,
I
interesting.
see a few other electronic artists. I see Skrillex. Yeah, Skrillex I can take in small doses. All
I'm
right.
I'm impressed with your music knowledge, Mai, and also the audience.
Awesome, May. All right. Shall we move on to the topic at hand, security?
We will. So this week we're going to talk about security in the cloud, and more importantly, cloud security for everyone. So security doesn't have to be a complicated or a complex solution. It can be pretty simple. But before I dive into that, if you're a new joiners, if you just joined the streaming, have a and make sure you register on our registration page so you don't miss out on our next streaming. So we have a She Built Tech Skills registration page. I just pasted in the link, and you can register on our registration page. So every time we're streaming monthly, and every time we're streaming, you get the notifications and email. Cool. So let's dive into security. All right. Why we're talking about security? I guess security is job zero for us, and it's everyone responsibility. So anyone who is working in the tech industry or even a non-tech industry, I guess security is everyone responsibility in terms of your day-to-day activities, like security about your own information, security about your maybe like your banking information, your health information, all these sort of stuff. It's really important to make sure that you're doing your part in the security. And when we talk to customers every day, and we talking about AWS share security responsibility model. And in the share responsibility model, I won't go too deep into it. What do you think? What is AWS responsibility in the cloud?
Yeah, I would say, I guess the easy way to say it is we'll look after the hardware that we look after, all the
Yeah.
way up to the operating system. And this also, well, May, you can probably go into detail after you go into the next
Yeah.
bit, but it depends on the service. So
It depends on the service. I love that answer because some services are different and they have a different responsibility, and it shifts depending on which AWS service you use. But it doesn't have to be complicated. It is pretty simple. Um, so, for example, very simple example like EC2, which is AWS Elastic Compute Cloud. It's a compute resource. You can run stuff on AWS using the EC2, and the responsibility, if you're running your workload using EC2, you have a responsibility to make sure your workload is safe, your network is safe, your data is safe, your EC2 patching, your operating system is safe. Versus if you're running that on serverless compute like Lambda, you have less responsibility because you are, leaving that heavy lifting of the AWS infrastructure and compute to AWS. So you're only worried about what you're running in that workload. So the security responsibility shift depending on the service, like Mai said. And I have a question for the audience. What do you think your responsibility in the cloud? Let's say you run maybe a simple workload. Maybe it could be a WordPress, could be containers. What do you think? What's your responsibility? Is it the data? Is it account? Have a guess. Anyone taking a guess? We are learning here, so it's fine. Don't be shy.
no wrong answers.
Hopefully, you can take away from some learning from today. And Lady Camille, sir, thank you. Encryption, KMS, absolutely. Data as REST. Yeah, data security is really important. And you both absolutely right. So the customer's responsibility is security in the cloud. So especially the data security, your AWS account information, and the workload running inside the cloud, that's the customer responsibility. So I'm going to talk through some of the foundational cloud security that you should be aware of. And hopefully after today, you can take away and have a look at it. Like, have you done this in your AWS account? Have you done this in the cloud resources? And how to remediate those if you have something misconfigured, if you haven't done it. So first thing we looked at is accurate account information. So what really mean is you need to have your AWS account information up to date. Why is it really matters? Because what if your AWS account got locked out, or what if you don't have access to your AWS account anymore? You need to regain that access back. Maybe even worse, what if your MFA get lost? And in that kind of situation, you need to have your account information accurate, because we're gonna check like, are you the real owner of this AWS account, and you get your access back. And Mai, have you ever had any incidents or any issue once you can't get your access to your AWS account, or like any like account that you use applications maybe?
Not me personally, but I've heard of customers, losing access because the previous person left, etc. So,
Yeah,
yeah. And going back to MFA, what is MFA for those that
great.
are new?
Great question. Multi-factor authentication. So it is a second layer authentication on your account. So you can. I think MFA is pretty standard these days. MFA comes in a hardware or software form, and you have a secondary layer to protect your account or your account information. So always have MFA on your root account. So AWS root account, and IAM users, because that way you can protect the AWS account and having the additional layer of security. Cool.
Should we
So
ask the audience if they've got multi-factor authentication enabled?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
In the audience, have you got MFA enabled in your AWS account, or do you know where to check that? If you can answer in the chat, that's good. Most definitely, that's great to hear. All the accounts that have MFA enabled, amazing. So MFA, I find it like it has been pretty become like a security standards having MFA. Like MFA on our mobile app, like your banking apps, you have MFA. Your, any sort of like even like shopping websites, sometimes they have an MFA. MFA on everything. That's right. All right, moving on to the next two things. So I guess this is mainly for system administrator. Like if you're a system administrator and you have to delegate access to developers, engineers, there are two types of access, like very common access: human access and programmatic access. The human access is usually you access from the console. Programmatic access, you might use the CLI or from one service to another, like in the microservice or containers architecture. So you might have a programmatic access. And how are you controlling these access, and how well do you know that how the IAM user or your user in the accounts are behaving within the AWS account? So it's really important for you as an administrator or as a user to have a control or a view of what is your IAM users activities are. Have they got MFA enabled? If you have all their accounts MFA enabled, like Ollie, that's great. We highly encourage you to have MFA enabled. Have the individual credentials, like no sharing credentials. So like everybody have their own credentials for a couple of reasons, because if something goes wrong, you can go back and audit who has been doing what and who have access to which information. So auditing purpose. And second is to reduce any security risk of sharing those credentials. So I have seen like some of the story back in the days, like really, really old back. Sometimes people share credentials in the channels or like in the chat room. Hey, here is the credential for share account, which is a big no-no.
Oh yeah, the hard-coded keys. Yeah, I've seen that
uh,
too.
do you know what I share this example every time I give like security conversation with the customers. I have actually like have done hard coded credentials when I went for an interview fresh out of uni. When I went for an interview, I had a hard coded credential for my coding test. So like technical interview, you have a coding test, you do the test, and they mark, or like if you pass the test, you get to the second round of the interview. And on the first round, I hard coded the credentials in the code base and then push it into a repository. And then the people from the interviewer side came back and say, "Hey, do you know that you have the hard coded credentials in the public repo?" And I was like, "Oh, sorry, that wasn't pretty." Yeah. Um, Cool. And Oli saying, I'm using STS row as an instance of API key. That's really a good way, like a good security hygiene. So the API keys are long-term credentials, so which means they're always there until you go and rotate them or you expire them. So API keys are long-term credential. Why we're encouraging STS, which is a short-lived credential, because they only live for a certain period of time and they get validated when the service make a request. So it's really improved the security rather than having the API key in the like my experience, API key hard coded in the repository, which is a very risky situation.
What
And
about rotating passwords? So, what do we use to rotate passwords, May?
that's a really good question. So you can rotate, you can force like your user on AWS account to rotate the password, maybe like every 90 days, every few months. That's great. You can have your credentials rotated. So like it could be any sort of, the credential, like application credentials or third-party credentials get rotated. So it just reduces the security risk in that case.
Yeah, I think AWS Secrets Manager is a good start for rotating credentials, and that's a key question that comes up from on all
Mm.
the AWS certification exams. If you want to know the difference between I think it's Systems Manager and what's the name of it?
Is it parameter store?
Yes, 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 that's right. Versus
The
yeah,
parameter store
Parameter Store versus Secrets Manager.
secrets manager.
Secrets
Yeah.
Manager does the key rotation. Um, so yeah, it does an auto rotate. Well, you got to configure it, but it
Yeah.
has the capability to rotate your keys. So yeah,
There you go. There's a difference. I think even when I took the exam, I remember that questions came up, the difference between secrets manager and parameter store. And they sound similar, right? The functionality similar. But when you actually use it, one does the key auto rotation, encryption as well. Parameter store is a secure string. It's not encrypted credentials. So there are still big difference, but when you just read through it, it's quite similar.
yeah, we've got LET here. So Terraform State can log API keys. So it's important to have the state in a secure, non-public storage like S3 with secure endpoint. I really like SSO login now. Next, we'll be loading System Manager, Parameter Store, and Secrets Manager. It's what we're talking about. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. SSO has been quite popular, like having SSO logging, and I've seen businesses like starting to use SSO, just easier, easy to manage, but single sign on for all the application, so less hustle for the user as well. All right. I can see there was somebody saying duplicate voice issue. If you're hearing duplicate voice issue, please let us know in the chat. I might need to get a new headphone. So yeah, if you're hearing that, thank you for pointing it out. But if you're hearing the voice, it's not clear, put it in the chat and let us know, and I'll probably switch to another headphone. All right. In the meantime, looking at secrets management. So we've talked about secrets management. So when we talk about secrets management, like it's secrets for your account, like AWS account, which is IAM user. Um, it could be a secrets for your applications. It could be a secrets for the database, so database password logging, and more most of the use cases are sometimes the secrets from the third party. So if you're like connecting with third party applications, you have a secrets and credentials or maybe tokens that you use. And how are you managing those? Are they secure? Are they encrypted? And are they rotated regularly? So that's a questions quite often raised. Like when we started out, it's quite simple from one service to another, but as it evolves, you have more and more application and more secrets. And how are you managing them? So really two important tips there. One is have a secrets management life cycles so you can easily manage all the secrets in one place and making sure they're encrypted and rotated. That's one. And two is to have the fine grained policy on your secrets. So it's really important to know who have access to those secrets. Does everyone in the organization have access to those secrets, or is it only privileged user have access to those secrets? Sometimes you could do, even you don't have access to secrets, but you can call the secrets manager to retrieve the user, and then the application can consume that secret. So that way, the user not actually, you're not revealing those secrets and password to the user. It's actually the application consuming it from one service to another. And short-lived credentials apply to anyway. So short-lived credential, we recommended to customer to use that for applications, for user. When you have applications, we say do not use the IAM user to connect from one service to another. Use the IAM roles, because roles are short-lived credential, where IAM user are long-lived credentials. So that will give you a bit of an idea of why short-lived credentials are important. In case if there is any information leak, you can protect the amount of the risks that might impose. So that's on the secrets management. Network access control. I think this is one of my favorite topics, because it touch on everything on AWS touch on network. Like, don't you think, like VPC, subnets, every workload touch on network access control. And I have to ask you, Mai, you're specialist, or you're specialized in containers and containers and Fargate or ECS Terraform. How do you think of the network control on those container services are important, like from security standpoint?
Yeah, so that's only one part of security, right? Network
Mm.
security. And especially if you look at Kubernetes security, in itself. It's very complex. So, from looking at it from Kubernetes perspective, it's like a cloud on a cloud, right? So, how do we secure at all layers? I think it has defense and depth. So, think about it as an onion. So, it's not just just the outside of the onion. Obviously, you need to secure all the layers, including the network. So, yeah, May, what are your thoughts around the defense and depth side of things?
Yeah, so it's like, if I were to explain this, like the core concept, like you said, it's like an onion. So you try to peel every pillars on that network, and having security in every pillars of your network. And network are not just VPC, because VPC is our virtual private cloud. So within the VPC, you have private subnets, you have public subnets, and you can have a control on that subnets. So we call it NACLs, network access controllers, to control the security on your subnet, or the secure application should stays in the private subnets, and or the public facing application should stay in the public subnets. So that is one, like that's the second layer of your network. So you have VPC, and then you have the private and public subnets. And then within the subnet, you have your own application. It could be like a web server. It could be your WordPress server. And you can have a security on those WordPress servers. So let's say if your WordPress is running on EC2 Elastic Compute Cloud, you can have a security group on your EC2. So that's another layer of security. So that's really the whole point of network access control and defense in depth, is having a security at the every layer of your network, not just on the VPC, not just on firewall. Like having it on every layer reduce the risk of any potential, attack, or any potential incidents on your workloads. And if you can detect it earlier, even better. So, for example, if you're using the security service like web application firewall, or any third-party service firewall in front of your workload, that's detect any sort of traffic that comes in that you're not aware of. You can block them, you can detect them, you can analyze them. And if you have more layers in the workload within your network, that makes it more secure. So
Yeah,
that's on the network access control.
let's talk about now. Let's go to the audience, right? So, does anyone here? Do they? First of all, I'm curious to know if everyone has any WordPress workloads. I used to. Fun fact: I actually used to work for a WordPress hosting company. Uh,
Really?
Yes, I
Wow.
did. I was a cloud engineer, so shout out to all the human-made folks out there. Yeah, so keen to know if anyone has WordPress workloads operating um, for their organization, or maybe it's a personal WordPress blog that they own and operate.
Yeah. No, WordPress was pretty popular. Like, um, it's still pretty popular, web hosting because it comes with all the whole package of, web hosting and plugins, and you can just put it together. I didn't know you were the cloud engineer.
Yeah, prior to joining AWS, so yeah, good old days. There's a few questions from the audience, May. All right, so WW Walker Web bots are always looking for .m files on my web server. What's the best way
Yeah.
to remediate that?
No, that's really good questions. Like environment files, sometimes because you store some of the parameters in the environment files, or maybe sometimes you store your versions and that sort of information in the environment files. And so, like bots protections, there are tons of security service. There are AWS native security service like web application firewall, which be able to smart enough to detect any bots or in like any sort of the traffic's coming in. And if you're using CloudFront, so which is the content delivery network with web application firewall, it gives you a really good protections around bot control. So if you haven't checked it out, I would recommend to check out that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. When I was a cloud engineer at said company, we had bots take down our customers' sites. So,
Oh no.
yeah, we should have had WAF enabled. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, we didn't have the rule enabled. I don't think we had it enabled at all. So
yeah.
definitely
It
recommend it.
it gave you the opportunity to like see what is happening at the edge. Like you can see the traffic comes in, you can block them or you can analyze them whether they are valid traffic or they are just anonymous and some sort of like random traffic is coming in. So it gave you a good visibility and also allow you to block any sort of suspicious attack on the application layer.
All right, a few more questions. When would I want to use NACL over a security group?
That's a good question because they serve for me. They serve a different purpose. Like knuckles, which is the network access control list, is for the subnets. So your subnets, like private subnet, public subnets, it's for the subnets, and security group is for instance. So for your EC2 instance, and the other difference is Knuckles, you can block traffic on Knuckles, whereas security group, you can't do that. You can't block traffic on a security group. So you can allow or deny on Knuckles, but you can't do that on security group. So I guess like it is more they complement each other rather than using one or the another because you have a knuckles and then you have a security groups, which means you have that layer of protection. So I would say to use both of them to ensure that you have the best out of the both of these knuckles and security group. What do you think, Mai?
Yeah. Sorry, kind of lost focus just there looking at comments. There's been a lot of banter in the comments. Sorry.
Ah,
Hey, Aaron. Aaron's here. Knuckles like a pizza box. It protects my pizza and all the toppings on my pizza. So he's got a really awesome analogy here.
we should
Yes.
invite Aaron's on our show one time.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Maybe we could ask Aaron, would you come on our show next month? Just put it in on the spot, Aaron.
Oh, he says yes. I love that. Awesome. It's on.
There you go. Um, thanks, Aaron's. Cool. So we're nearly there. So I'm just quickly cover vulnerability management because that's really one of the most important topic, but we sometimes forget about it. So vulnerability management is on the management of your operating system or your compute. It could be like patching on your EC2. It could be like your library updates, or it could be as simple as like, sometimes I have an iPhone, and sometimes you get the operating system updates, notifications. You have to update the operating system because they have found the security bugs, or they have improved some sort of security and performance. And updating that is really protect you from this any kind of security bugs that might potentially have an impact. And vulnerability management here applies to your EC2 workload. It could apply to your containers, like ECS or Fargate. And it should be a way you could manage pretty easily. Like, for example, like system manager, patch manager. If you don't know what it is, I will share the link in a minute. So it is really help you to patch your operating system, making sure they're up to date. So if we have found, like, if the software, the developers have found any sort of bugs, they've updated the version, and then that's where the vulnerability updates has come out. And we highly recommend, as soon as it comes out, do some testing, update your operating system, or update your EC2 underlying OS, that kind of thing. So that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just the EC2s, right? There's vulnerabilities in the application code base and
Yeah.
dependencies as well, right? So I'm thinking instantly from a developer point of view, it'll be like Code Whisperer. It will be um, a way to tell you if there's any um, vulnerabilities in application code base. And from, systems manager, patch manager actually works with any if you have any on-premises virtual machines. So you just need to install the agent, and then you can manage that through systems manager, patch manager, and update all your servers, whether it be on premises or on AWS. So it's
Yeah.
handy
I,
here.
it goes hand in hand, and definitely. And like Oleg said, Inspector is the AWS security service, so it's looking for if there's any out of date operating system, out of date library, so it's finding if there's any like out of compliance operating system, again, libraries that's running in your AWS environment. Inspector is really helpful to find it. And then, like Mai said, use the system manager, patch manager to schedule a patching window. So like you can have patching between maybe 1 to 3 a.m. Do the patching of your operating system, patching of your EC2, and that kind of thing. So they go hands in hand. Cool. There is another question. So from Grana Dog, what is the best solution for workspaces with microservices without many complication and high security?
Workspaces, are you talking about the Amazon workspaces?
Amazon Works. Yeah.
Are you talking about um, yeah, so probably more information required. High security, what does that mean? Because we talked about security in layers, so it's not just one solution that will make sure that it's highly secure. You need to have several different approaches to it. So it's not just one solution that will tick all the boxes. There really
Mm.
isn't. Then you need to have a look at all the layers. So I wonder if we do have like a blog article that goes through, particularly around microservices, around defense and def. Let me see if I can find that somehow. But
Yeah, that,
yeah,
yeah. And Grana Dog will try to share that information. So I do have a blog post, or maybe a slide, where talking about which security dimension that you should look at, and that will probably give you an idea of which area that you should look at from the security perspective. It doesn't have to be just for the microservices. It could be any applications that's running in your environment. I might share that just after the next two topic. So S3 buckets. It's one of the most popular service, I would say, and S3 is a simple storage service that you can store any kind of objects, images, text, CSV, any file that you can store on the S3. How do you secure them, and how do you know if your buckets are secure or not? So it's really, there are a lot of controls on the S3, and if you haven't explored that on the AWS console, have a look at the if you have a private data, making sure that your S3 bucket is locked down, it's not sharing like open publicly to the wall. Its S3 bucket is encrypted, and if you're using some of the use cases, like my customer use S3 as a static website, and if you're using S3 as a static website, have you thought about leveraging the content delivery network like CloudFront to add two things? One is the performance, two is the security. So S3 and CloudFront goes hands in hands to improve the security in terms of you can have a better security with the CloudFront, and also you can have a better performance because you're not requesting the data every time you are making a request to the origin server. And thank you, Ollie, for sharing that. S3 bucket is not publicly accessed, really important. You have a bucket policy, so you lock down your bucket and who can access what. OAC is enabled, and using the S3 endpoints. You're spot on. I have to say, Ollie, you're spot on. So no opening the buckets, using the endpoint to access the S3. So that's really good security hygiene there.
Yeah, so curious to know if the audience, obviously some of you are already using S3. What are you using your S3 bucket for? Can you share with us? Is it for a single page web app, or is it just to store images or something like that? Keen to know what you're using your S3 buckets for.
Yeah, S3 support encryption by default. That's true. I'd say that's a newly released service or newly released feature on S3. S3 for backups. That's a really like common use case.
Single page web app. Yep. Yep. CloudFront. Yep. Yep. Backups. Log backups. Data lakes. Yes, data lakes. We haven't talked about analytics much today.
No,
yeah,
we haven't.
Yeah.
Maybe, do you know how you can cost optimize on S3? There are, multiple ways to cost optimize on S3 if you're storing long-term backups. If you're using logs, if you're using as for like archival purpose, there are ways. Maybe that could be our next month episode, Mai. How to cost optimize on S3, and how do you know how your data on S3 has been accessed? Like, do you have that visibility? If you want to know more about it, put it in the chat, and that could be the next topic for our show.
Yeah, we're always open to topic requests.
Yeah, from that lady Kami Samar. Intelligent hearing, yes, intelligent hearing is one of the most popular way to optimize costs when you don't know how the data is accessed. Let's say when you don't know the access pattern on an S3, intelligent hearing is the way to go. But there's also other ways.
CI/CD code build artifacts. Yeah, that's definitely.
Yeah, that's quite popular. I have one sitting in there to use the CI/CD with code build. Definitely.
Oh, wow,
Lifecycle policy. Yeah, S3 lifecycle policy. That's also quite popular. When you know their patterns on your S3 and how it has been accessed, you use the lifecycle policy to move between the different storage tier on S3. So that way you can save costs.
And then you've got storing CUR, so cost and usage report data. So that is definitely useful. So for those of you who haven't seen our other episode, one of our technical account managers, she talked about kudos. So cost and usage dashboard. What's OS? I forgot what OS stands for, but it'll give you a nice dashboard of what your cost and usage looks like. So using S3 and all the analytics services. So have a look at that as well. See if
Yeah,
you can pull that up. Yeah.
cool. It's so many interactivities in the chat today, so thank you so much for joining and having a chat, having fun with that. Hope you get some takeaway. um Very very high level, so like I'm just taking a step back and looking at from a holistic view of the security pillar from the cloud perspective. So there are five dimension in the security pillar, and I just want to quickly go over. So when you look at next time when you look at your workload, you can have a look at it in more holistic view of what is in that security. So first, we talk about identity and access management. Who has access to what and how you're controlling the permission. It's really important. Detection. How can you detect what is happening in your workloads? It could be a network. It could be like a some sort of traffic coming into their network, or any sort of the um, out of date compliance operating system patching, that kind of detection. So have you got detection on your AWS account? Infrastructure protections. We talk about network protection and compute protection. So what sort of infrastructure protections do you have if you're using service like maybe EC2, VPC? Have you got some level of visibility on that? Data protections, I think that's applicable to like most of the businesses and account. Have you got data classifications? It is one of the very first steps when you do a security. Have you classify private, public, sensitive data in your account? It could be into S3 or it could be in the database. Have you classified that? We talk about protecting the data as rest, protecting data as transit. So data protection is one thing. Incident response. I think that's really it's not advanced topic. It's not super complicated, but I haven't seen in some of the customer I haven't adopted to it. So how do you respond to the incident if something goes wrong? Is your application aware of the incidents? Is your team aware of the incidents? So it's not just on the application, it's also the culture of the team. It's if you have a security team, how do they respond to that, and how do they work together with the developers? So incident response and be able to recover as quickly as possible so business can function. Um, so those are the five dimensions that you should look at from more high level overview when you're building applications on the AWS workload.
So, May, we've got a question here from Ollie T. Would AWS config remediation can be bucketed to incident response?
Interesting. I'm not sure. So because AWS config is where you can have a configuration and you can have some level of compliance control in the config. And if you remediate from that, need to clarify what do you mean by bucketed into incident response?
I think she means
Or
like it's part of incident response, and I can answer that. You would say that it can form part of it, but AWS config in itself probably can't remediate it. Well, we can't because it needs to work with, lambdas, needs to work with Event Bridge, or needs to work with something that, a rule is triggered. Let's say your S3 bucket is public. I don't think that will happen, but if someone made it public, how do we use config to auto remediate? So config needs to talk to Lambda, needs to talk to Event Bridge, and then it needs to do a downstream workflow from there, right? So it can't work in its own, but it can form part of incident response. Now, this is a question to the audience. So what are some key operational processes in order to form your incident response strategy for your organization? What do you need to create? What is it? Well, I won't give any hints.
give us a clue, Mike.
Starts with
A
P.
little clue. Start with P.
Starts with P.
Okay, let's see if anyone can guess.
Yeah, procedures and strategies. Yeah, sort of. It's similar in that vein, but it's called something specific. Plan. Yes, you need a plan. What do you call those? You can have a manual one and then you can have an automated one.
This is a tricky question, Maya.
Policy. Yeah, a policy. Yeah, that will tie into that. Maid, can you take a guess?
I don't know. I'm dare not to take the guess.
It's playbooks. Playbooks, right? You need playbooks, automated or manual playbooks, to know exactly, if there's an incident, you need to do these
According
steps.
to, yeah.
Yeah. Playbooks and runbooks. I think it ties in well with your next topic, I think. Well architected.
That is right. So, like we talk about security pillars, and it's really important to have, like Mai said, the playbook. So, if anything goes wrong, everyone has been practiced according to the playbook, and they have been experienced before actually it happens, right? So the playbook help you to familiarize if things goes wrong, how to recover, how to go back online, and it's really helped to get that bridging the gap within, like if you have a new members, you can easily get them on board, familiarized with the process and tools. To-do list, it's very similar. It's I think this is more like a run book to-do list. It's like you have the steps of things that you're going to do if thing goes wrong. Bring back the server, set up the environment variables, change the configurations, that kind of things. A list of it to do. Yeah. So, um, as we're talking security, actually, the security topic that we talk about is actually extracted from AWS well architected framework. And Mai, do you want to give a 2 minutes pitch on the well architected framework? Off you go.
Okay, it's a collection of best practices gathered from all of our experiences. We've architected good practices within AWS across 6 pillars. Boom.
There you go. That's really good. I'm impressed. And we have a new pillars that was announced, but it has been a while. So it used to be 5 pillars, and now it is 6 pillars, and we have a sustainability pillars. But today focus is on the security pillars. And if you want to know more about security pillars, have a look at the link I just shared in the chat. It's really described and get that perspective on the security when you are working with cloud technology. So, and there is another information on the design principle. So you don't have to be a solutions architect, you don't have to be an engineer, but it's just something that you can keep in mind. Or when you talk to your colleague, having that security design principle in mind has really helped you to think from a different perspective why it is important, why we do things like having a traceability, why do we have a security at every layer of our network, why do we do things. So it helped you to answer those questions on why we do things in that way. So have a look at the design principles. It's just maybe a bit of a nighttime reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, we have a minute left. So please join us again at AWS She Tech Skills. We will be on every third
Thursday.
Friday?
Oh,
Thursday.
Friday.
Thursday. Oh, well, Friday Australian time, Thursday
Thursday Pacific time.
Pacific time, US time. So keep an eye out for that. And any
And
other closing notes, May?
No, that's a wrap. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mai, for joining an hour session. Thank you to the audience for joining 2 hour sessions. Hope we will see you all again next month, and we will come back with more interesting topics. So stay tuned for that.
Bye all.
See ya.